Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining this webinar today on UAE invoicing, Peppol insights from Finland Peppol Authority and from multinationals as well, how the business are preparing for electronic invoicing implementation in the UAE. Before we are going to start, I have to cover some housekeeping items to ensure that everyone has a smooth and enjoyable experience as well in this webinar. First, ensure your microphone is on mute throughout the webinar. So this helps to minimize background noise and ensures clarity to all participants. Second, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to raise your hand and we will try to answer all your questions during the webinar. And third, if you have any questions after the webinar, please contact us. As part of the introduction, my name is Joanna Caceres. I'm Director of E-Invoicing at Dhruva, and also I have participated in different forums for electronic invoicing implementation globally and part of the CTC community as well from Peppol. Today we have as a guest Hannu from the Peppol Authority from Finland, Joanna, Senior Tax Manager at Shell, and Kamil, who is our partner from Oxinus, who is the CTO of Oxinus. So can you please introduce yourself as a quick reference, please? Joanna first.
Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. As was already mentioned by Diana, I'm Joanna Pomierny, and I'm tax team manager at Shell, responsible for indirect tax activities for several countries, including the UAE and Oman.
Thank you, Joanna. Hannu?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Hannu Kivinen, and I work at the State Treasury of Finland, which is also the Peppol Authority of Finland. And I'm also a member of the Post-Award Change Management Board in OpenPeppol and take part in standardization work done in the Europe.
Thank you, Hannu. Kamil?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kamil Dzikowski. I'm the CTO at Oxinus Holdings. We're one of the accredited service providers for e-invoicing in the UAE. I've been working with e-invoicing system startups and all kinds of technology for the past 13 years here in the UAE. Happy to be here with you today.
Thank you very much, everyone, and happy to hear all your insights. And actually, it's not only for me, but all the attendees that are really interested on how they will start implementing electronic invoicing in the UAE. So what we are going to cover today is a quick introduction. Then we'll continue with Hannu with what should companies consider when adopting e-invoicing, especially when it comes to adoption through the Peppol network, which is very new, and Shell sharing experience on implementation of electronic invoicing in other jurisdictions, and especially here, being a multinational in the UAE, what are the main challenges they foresee they can face in the future, and a creative service provider in the UAE, how is this process, and what are the main areas to consider when we are going to implement electronic invoicing. And last, Q&A questions. As a quick introduction, in the UAE recently, the ministerial decisions were released last week, ministerial decision 243, 244, and they really established the timeline of implementation in the UAE. First, they would say that the mandatory rollout was 1st of July 2026. However, with this new ministerial decision, it was a delay in the implementation for 6 months. So now we have a new date for a full implementation, a mandatory implementation. Now we see the phases are established and clearly defined in the UAE. So 1st of July 2026 is a pilot program and voluntary implementation. All companies that want to implement voluntarily can do it from 1st of July 2026. And the phase rollout will be very short phase based on the revenue. And the first wave would be for large enterprises. So basically, this will be applicable to multinationals like Shell and the go-live implementation will be 1st of January 2027. This timeline may seem very far from now because it's more than 1 year. However, we will see that before the implementation, there are a lot of things to be done that we are going to discuss throughout this webinar. So this is the Peppol model at the corner that will be implemented in the UAE. Something that we need to note in this model is UAE will be the first country which is going to implement electronic invoicing fully using the Peppol network. And it will be not only for issuing invoices, but also receiving the invoices. At the moment, B2C is not covered as part of the electronic invoicing mandate in the UAE, and also Peppol doesn't cover a B2C transaction yet. With this in mind, Hannu, I will hand over to you and to share what the background, a little bit the background on Finland Peppol implementation, invoicing implementation using Peppol, and what, based on your experience, what should companies consider when adopting invoicing? So over to you.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, as I already introduced myself in the next slide, there's also the text that I work at the State Treasury of Finland. But if you want to have a little bit background about Finland and why it maybe matters what I say about e-invoicing, is that the reason is that we have done e-invoicing for 25 years, so quite a long time already. But if Finland is not familiar to you, we are a sort of small country in the north with population about 6.5 million. We have a lot of lakes, a lot of forest, and a lot of saunas, so you might know about us about that. But if you talk about the e-invoicing side, then the adoption rate is already like 90% of all invoices are e-invoices, so it's very high. And if you look at the B2G invoices, it's 98%, so nearly all already. However, these are not Peppol invoices. We have a national e-invoicing system in place with two different formats. One is called Finvoice that also supports the B2C transactions, and that's also maybe one of the big reasons why like 20 years ago the invoicing took off quite nicely in Finland. Then the other one is called TIAPS XML, that's used mostly in B2B invoicing. And then Peppol is mainly used for cross-border invoices, but also we are very interested in the possibilities it offers in the procurement side, like orders and catalogs and other messages. Then the background about the regulation in Finland is that we don't have very strict laws around the invoicing, but there is a law that says that the receiver of the invoice can request that the seller issues an e-invoice. So this is really the basic, but it has never been sort of tested in court what would happen if somebody refuses this. But it has meant that even if we have the 90%, the growth has been quite slow because it has taken 25 years. But then another piece of the regulation says that the Finnish government agencies, such as State Treasury, Tax Authority, all of these kind of agencies, they must be able to receive e-invoices. And back in 2010, we stopped accepting paper or PDF invoices altogether. So that's why we have the 98%. So this is the background of Finland. And if we want to go forward to the sort of what kind of lessons we have learned over the 25 years time, I would say that invoicing is not done by a single company. It's not done by the government. It's really a shared effort. You have to work together with different industries, with public sector and also the state authorities to drive forward the common goal of having a large adoption rate of e-invoicing. So that also means that even if service providers are competing against each other, they also need to cooperate. because nobody can alone have the whole market to themselves. They must be able to work together to reach the common goal. And one thing that we did in Finland back in the day was establishing this kind of e-invoicing forum. So that's owned by the service providers. They meet quite often, discuss things, how should maybe things be fixed in this network, what are the common goals, so they can sort of fix things together, not just blindly go forward and wish for the best. And one thing that they decided quite early on was that we need to have this kind of e-invoicing registry. So this, you might know Peppol directory, which is the place where you can look up the receiving Peppol address of a company. So we have a similar one in Finland, which lists the sending and receiving capabilities of every organization in Finland that is connected to the e-invoicing network. It's a little bit different to the Peppol directory in a way, because, well, you could say that Peppol directory was created as a proof of concept. So it's quite technical. It has all this information about different processes, and that might look like ordinary things for people who know Peppol. But if I'm the average Joe and go to Peppol directory, it might be quite hard to navigate and understand what processes those two companies actually support. So our national e-invoicing registry is a little bit more simple, and it has really been a key factor in the boosting the adoption rate, because there you don't need to ask your suppliers or your other business partners if they already support invoicing or not. You can just check, and if they have the address, you can just send the invoice without asking them. So it has really been a nice thing to have, and I hope that the Peppol directory is in some time also developed a little bit more further. And then we can also think about invoicing is sort of easy when you do it in the big companies because they have money to implement things. But if you talk about small companies, they really need to have service providers or software houses who have made these end user interfaces ready for them. So they can just go online and pick which system they want to use. They don't have the possibility of having an ERP project about things or make big integrations. So it should be made as easy as possible the end user to adopt e-invoicing to really get the sort of the long tail in the end going as well.
Hannu,
and then
here.
I think I have a...
Yes, so I think we can stop a little bit here about the invoicing registry, because in the UAE we have a lot of questions, and businesses are asking, how do we make sure that the third party is on the Peppol network? Because as you rightly mentioned, Peppol directory is under development, so is in progress. We don't know if in the UAE the invoicing registry that is available in other markets like Finland will be available in the UAE. What is your recommendation? How businesses can check in more accurate manner if the third party is on the Peppol network, if there is no invoicing registry, only we need to use at the moment Peppol directory?
Well, then you have to go the manual way and just asking every single supplier separately, do you support Peppol or not? And that's a little bit time consuming, and it might lead to situations where actually both parties are capable of doing e-invoicing, but they just don't know that they already have this connection between them. So maybe my advice would be to the Peppol Authority of UAE to support that the Peppol directory is developed further and it has all the summer functionality that is needed.
Yes. So, and at the moment, we don't really know. This is what we are hoping that UAE will develop, that invoicing registry similar to Finland and other jurisdictions. However, this is part of one of the manual process that businesses need to think about when going to implement electronic invoice. And it's not only if the service provider, if the company is on the Peppol network, or the service provider is on the Peppol network, but also what are the capabilities? Are the capabilities to issue, to receive, or both of everything? We are expecting that the UAE, they will have all the capabilities because there will be a list of invoicing service provider, accredited service provider. So the capabilities should, by default, should be all. So let's see how this develops, but this invoicing register will efficiently save time to the businesses.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, let's move.
Was there some other questions, or do we move forward to the Peppol side of? So then in the next slide, I talked about that Finland has a national e-invoicing system, but the reason for that is not that Peppol is not good. The reason is that Finland started e-invoicing journey before Peppol existed. So the Peppol project started in 2008, and we already started using e-invoices in the 2000s. So we had an established network and decided to go with it when Peppol came. But if I would consider the situation now, that if we didn't have a national system, of course we would adopt Peppol as the e-invoicing network fully in the domestic market as well. But as we have this history, then we have to sort of balance between those two networks. But I'm really happy that we did establish the Peppol Authority in 2020. Our main goal is to increase the usage of electronic ordering, but this cross-border e-invoicing is really a major bonus for us, because right now, even if we say that we have a 90% or 98% e-invoices, when we try to send invoices, for example, to Sweden, which is our neighboring country, we get a block. No, it doesn't work anymore. And that can't be the sort of end goal of e-invoicing. We really need to be part of the global system that Peppol is, and I'm really happy that that has now been through for a couple of years. But maybe we can move away from Finland and think about you as a company. At least my take on what should companies think when they are now in UAE starting to think about is e-invoicing something that we need to adopt? When do we need to adopt, and this kind of thing? So I have made a little list of questions that we can go through. I would maybe start with thinking about the whole invoicing process in your company. How does it work from start to finish? So map it all out, and once you have done that, you should think about which parts are actually manual steps. Maybe we have a fancy e-invoicing system which all the checks in place, but in the end it spits out a PDF or something, not digital information. So that's really one thing that you should think. Is there something that we can automate if we start using e-invoices? Then I think it's a little bit what we already discussed about the directory. How do you right now deliver your invoices to your business partners, and also how do you receive your invoices? Is this by paper mail, PDFs, email? Do you already have e-invoicing? If you're, for example, a multinational corporation, probably you might have e-invoicing systems in place in some country. So this is something that you should take a look at. But yeah, the main thing is map out this whole process. Think where are the manual steps. And once you have that done, I would think, what can we actually do if we remove these manual steps, automate them, and maybe not think about how many employees we can cut off. Think about what can these employees do with their free time when it's not being used in typing information into system that once already was digital. So they can think about, for example, if we think about procurement, what should we buy, from who should we buy, instead of using the time typing in information into systems. So yeah, this is my sort of first thing. Map out the process, think about where are the manual steps, is it possible to automate them, and then what can we do instead of doing the manual work. And then I think I have another slide, maybe a little bit more about the system side of things. Most likely your company already has an e-invoicing system that you use to track invoices, but it might be done in a way that it's really fancy. It has all the steps, but it's in the end, it lacks the last connection to send the invoices. So you might already have all the required information for sending invoice, but in the end you create a PDF and send it via email, which is not good enough in my opinion, because you lack then you lose the sort of benefits you can gain from using the e-invoice. So maybe think about, if your system already has all the information, can we just connect it to the Peppol network? Because it's not good to send a PDF. At least if I would consider the situation in Finland, when we are used to sending invoices, it would be strange to send a PDF invoice, and many would not accept it anymore. So maybe in the coming years that will be also happening in the UAE, that you really need to support e-invoicing to be sort of on the edge of development. Then of course the question is, if you have the system, you know that the steps you need to take, how much would it cost? And I think that depending on your company size, you maybe should consider asking somebody, maybe the service providers of e-invoicing or somebody else from your system providers about their help in the journey of how to connect your systems to invoicing networks, because it might seem like a bigger project than it actually is. We are used to making these kind of EDI connections that are one-to-one connections, and it's quite costly. But in Peppol, you make this connection once, and then you don't have to repeat it every time with every supplier. So in the end, it will be quite a lot cheaper. And one important question is as well, do you have your own e-invoicing system as you have created it from scratch, or are you using a system somebody else is providing for you? So that is relevant, because do you need to make the investment yourself, or are you buying the service from somebody else? So that's a relevant question. And the last steps are then, once you have sort of implemented it, with who are you starting to use it first? I think the best idea is to find your largest business partners and ask them, can we start using invoices? Because then you get the highest volumes straight from the start. But in the long run, I would say that you can use e-invoices with big, small, and every size company. So it doesn't really differentiate in that way. And the last steps here is you need to have realistic goals, not just adopt it in the system, but also think that now we have made the investment, how do we follow up that we actually achieve the level of invoicing that we want in the coming years? So I think these were my sort of take on what kind of questions should you consider.
Yes, I think this is very interesting, and a lot of companies in the UAE are, where should I start? So you mentioned a few topics, especially when it comes to electronic invoicing, system provider. Do we need to make the investment to become an accredited service provider in the UAE or not? So based on other jurisdictions' experience in Saudi, for example, I know some large companies who made the investment. It's not really accredited service provider like in UAE, but however, this approach will it requires a lot of investment and also continuous support. And this is what companies will not have in mind when they decided to become as a service provider themselves. They need to constant support because invoicing legislation will not be static, will change over time, and the coverage will be more. And this is just the beginning. B2B, B2G transactions coverage is just the beginning and only invoicing. But also this approach will be extended to other areas like payroll, for example, that was implemented in Latin America after electronic invoicing implementation or automation of tax returns. So so here in the UAE, you have the list of accredited service provider, and they already passed the test because it's a very extensive test that they have to go through. So these are questions, and thank you so much, Hannu, for all your insights. But let's go through the business side from Joanna. So does it align with your perspective and your experience implementing electronic invoicing in other markets? And what are the current process? What are the current considerations you are having as a leader in tax and implementing electronic invoicing in the UAE?
Yeah, thank you, Diana. So maybe let me start with sharing some information, some experience which I can see and which I believe will be useful also for others. Focusing on areas which business can focus on now to be prepared to the implementation, invoicing implementation in the UAE better. And here I think we have 4 areas which should be considered. And the first one is like a little bit administration work, which is somehow connected with the communication. I'm pretty sure that everyone on the local market are aware of the invoicing implementation, but when it comes to international companies, from our experience, this is like a key to have to ensure that all relevant functions are informed about the project coming in the UAE. Especially that when it comes to global environment, this involves managing communication across regions and establishing really clear communication chain, especially with senior leadership, highlighting the project importance and the potential risk of being non-compliance. So this is like a starting point for each implementation, in our case, invoicing implementation in the UAE. Then also a project team should be established, ideally led by the project manager, who will oversee both technical but also financial aspects of the implementation. We all know that each implementation is a matter of system, it's a matter of work and effort. It means it's a matter of budget. So this person will be somehow responsible to deliver the project on a timely manner, but also within the budget. Then for sure we should also consider a little bit about our systems processes, and this is basically what also Hannu mentioned, that we should begin to be ready when it comes to system environment. And if it has not been done yet, some kind of process identification, addressing some kind of gaps prior the implementation as a part of preparation phase is also a crucial step, just to avoid bigger issue during the go live date. Therefore, here, when it comes to some kind of process review, close cooperation with the project team, process architects, IT, finance function, whoever needs to be involved in this exercise, especially for multinational companies handling sometimes thousands, not to say that millions transactions per period across diverse scenarios where the process may differ depending on many factors, depending on the business nature of the business, depending on system, etc. So here, complexity and scale of operation demand really strong functional partnership and cross-cooperation. And last, but I think not least, and this is very important area which we should focus on, is having an engagement with external service providers who will simply help us with the implementation, who will support with designing the solution and implement it into our daily operation. And this is extremely important also for the companies who are international companies, but they do not have any presence, for example, in the UAE. Yeah, so just to have someone who is locally based and who can track everything what is happening around the implementation. So these are the areas which from our experience, we should, as international companies, we should focus on. And also, I would like to refer a little bit to the legislation which has been already published by the Ministry of Finance in the UAE, and also the challenges which we've already foresee and which potentially may be a challenge for during the implementation. For sure, we have some concerns about outside of scope transactions, which fall within the scope of invoicing implementation. And this concerns from the fact that VAT grouping is allowed in the UAE, and transactions between VAT group members are outside of the VAT reporting scope. However, under the new invoicing framework, these transactions will now need to be captured. And I know that there might be a risk that the same coding, which is outside of scope, is currently being used both for transactions, which is a supply of goods or services within the VAT group, but also for other purely accounting entries, which has nothing to do with the supply of goods or services. So this overlap can somehow potentially lead to confusion and incorrect reporting. Therefore, to address this gap, there may be a need to explore whether a separate coding can be introduced to distinguish supply of goods or services, which are really supply of goods and services out of the scope, versus other accounting entries which are coded also outside of scope, to simplify the coding in our ERP. And another challenge, which has been also foreseen at the time when the legislation has been published, is the requirement of having local IP address for tax related documentation, what means that all tax invoice credit notes will have to be coded with local IT. And from my perspective, from our experience, it might be a challenge, especially for international companies, which, as I already mentioned, it may happen that some of international companies, they do not have any presence in the UAE, but only because of the type of supply, they are, for example, registered for VAT, and they will also fall into in the scope of invoicing implementation, but they have no office, no staff, nothing basically. So but also for other companies which are also international, and they do have, for example, staff or office in the UAE, but their function has been somehow centralized. So I'm not sure how it will be solved from the IT perspective, but for sure this is something what we should consider deeper with the IT.
Thank you, Joanna. You touched a very interesting point What about out-of-scope transactions that now is under invoicing scope and invoicing mandate? So as you rightly mentioned, we should go and see if the transactions are aligned, but also from the invoicing perspective, what I would like to say is not only for tax purpose or VAT purpose, the main purpose for to implement electronic invoicing in a country level is to track all transactions from the business, regardless if they are going to be reported in the VAT return or not. So do you have any insights on this aspect, Hannu? Because globally, invoicing is basically what are your operations and track every single transaction that you have. Hannu, do you like to add something here?
It might be a little bit different in Finland since we have these national formats. So right now they have support for a little bit more than what Peppol offers. For example,
Yes.
the B2C or some other types of invoices. So I don't think we have had maybe that problem brought up as much, but I'm sure it's quite relevant when considering when you sort of adopt invoicing as a new system. So you have all these parallel things that you're doing in place, but we have had in Finland 25 years to fix these things. So I think it's works quite nicely in Finland.
Yes. Good. Joanna, from your perspective as well, now where we are in terms of implementation, the legislation is out. So the business already went through all analysis of the business process, invoicing process, and where you are, do you see your implementation quite far, or still there is a lot of work to be done to be ready?
Yeah, sorry for cutting you, Diana, but indeed we are at the beginning. We are just created the project team. So we are finalizing with establishing a communication with senior stakeholders. So we are at the beginning and we have a lot of work to do. That's obvious. But the only good news is that when it comes to our compliance process, it seems to be under control because we do perform daily compliance activities. So we are quite comfortable when it comes to our processes.
In terms of selection, the invoicing provider, as a business, what is the main areas that you focus on when it comes to selecting an invoicing provider?
This is something that it's usually agreed on, let's say, a higher level. And to be honest, I'm not involved in this discussion because it's the decision which is not on my shoulders. So, yeah, but so basically, this is what I can comment on this.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Kamil. From your side, and you work a lot with the business and being the CTO of Oxinus, who is a service provider, approved service provider in the UAE. What are the main requests that you have from businesses in terms of integration and requirements?
Hi. So yes, we're getting a lot of inquiries. The problem with implementation of e-invoicing, probably not just in the UAE, but in every other country, is that each company is using different solutions, different ERP systems. Some of these systems are well equipped in APIs and connectivity, but some of them aren't. And this is where the problem starts. We've actually had a lot of companies that don't have any ERP system. They operate in a way that they just issue invoices, using Excel files, or they have some templates. And to bring them to the level to be compliant with the ministry and regulations, we actually developed our own e-invoicing solution that we give them as a part of the package that helps them to jump on the e-invoicing ship and be compliant from day one. As you know, changes within the organization that are related to big software implementations are usually hard and costly, especially for larger organizations. At the end of the day, this is why we learn from countries like Finland. We will get there. As also Joanna mentioned, some extra effort is required here and there in terms of extra development, extra coding, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
Thank you, Kamil. Yes, and that Joanna mentioned about the global experience. However, when it comes for multinationals with only operational presence in the UAE, there are a lot of challenges as well, because they need to have the local knowledge and how really business are operating each other. Also, a lot of new data will be required specifically for UAE. So basically, you need to consider all the trade licenses are up to date. Check if this is my identification of the third party, my clients, my customers. How will be identified in the invoicing network? So basically, if what happened if it's VAT registered or non-VAT registered. So this might be different. Also, given the recent ministerial decisions, what is the timeline to issue the invoice when it's a business VAT register or no VAT register? So here we have created some high-level areas that we think businesses need to work on, starting preparing for implementation of electronic invoicing in the UAE. So there are a lot of areas, as Joanna mentioned: IT, finance, tax, and operations. And of course, everything should be along with the service provider. Also, there are a lot of data to be designed, and what we need to, what are the final decisions that we need to make when it comes to agree with the information that we are going to share in the tax invoice. So, Hannu, there's one question about how we can do when PDF is no longer available or is available on the Peppol network, but the valid invoice is the XML. So, and of course, there are in the Peppol network, there is an option that we can attach PDF to or extra documents to the XML, to the electronic invoice. So have you seen any challenges by doing this in the Peppol network?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of discussion around it. Some countries don't really want any PDFs as attachments. They only see the XML as the invoice and nothing else should be considered. In Finland, the companies are used to seeing PDF, but that PDF is created from the XML. So that doesn't change anything about which is the real invoice. It's always the XML. That's the relevant information. But for some, let's say, normal people who are not into invoices or Peppol, it might be easier to them to see a representation of the data in a PDF format. So it has all the same fields or the relevant fields shown, and they can sort of process the PDF, but the invoice is also always the XML, and that's what goes into the invoicing system that they really accept. Of course, this can lead to situations where what happens if the PDF and the XML don't match, and that can be a huge problem. And in a way, if that happens, and at least in Finland, the XML is always an invoice, and you are at fault if you didn't check the XML. So it can lead to situations like this, but usually it works. So, but maybe the best way of creating these sort of visuals of the invoice would be to use the so-called style sheets. So it's the XML that's transformed into something that the normal person can see and understand if they don't talk XML.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So this is the same comments we hear from business or the jurisdictions when it comes to Peppol. There is a discrepancy. Sometimes can be discrepancy between the PDF and the XML. So what they can do, of course, invoicing XML from now on when A will be implemented in the UAE, invoicing will be the support, and XML will be the support of all the transactional data. So even for tax returns, when it comes after invoicing implementation, any audit would be done using electronic invoicing, which is the XML. And it is seen in other markets that only XML is acceptable. So conscious of time, we are going through some of the Q&A, our Q&A session. So Kamil, please, over to you.
Thank you. I think we can all handle these questions. These fall into different areas of expertise. But let me start with opening the subject of, are all companies covered or no? And does the incorporation matters? Where is it registered? Is it the branch of a foreign company? That's actually something for you, Diana. I think you should clarify the coverage for the scope of the e-invoicing in the UAE, as it says the first part is B2B related. And there is another question later on also for the government entities that have been exempt from e-invoicing that I will cover. So, but first, please just give a brief on how are we going to do it in the UAE.
So yes, thank you, Kamil. In the UAE, electronic invoicing is going to implement first B2B, B2G, and G2G. So at the moment, business to consumer is not part of the invoicing implementation, but we are expecting in a few years' time it will be, because the idea is to cover all transactions. And but at the moment, it's only B2B, B2G.
Correct. And there is a question related to it. Government entities operating in a sovereign capacity are exempt from implementing the invoicing system as per Ministerial Decision 243 from 2025. In cases where such a government entity is the client, how should the e-invoice be issued or delivered to them? And how would the supplier compliance obligations be fulfilled in this scenario? So it is true that government entities operating in sovereign capacity are exempt from the invoicing solution, in which case you, as a supplier, you should share the invoice through any alternative mechanism as agreed between you and the government entity. But as a supplier also, you must fulfill all compliance obligations such as proper invoicing, record keeping, and reporting. The exemption is for the government entity, not the supplier. So suppliers still will remain responsible for invoicing according to the regulations.
Thank you, Kamil. I think this is, we can take all of us the insights. How long does it take to implement invoicing for a large multinational company? I think, Joanna, based on your experience, how long for you depends on the jurisdiction, but how long normally it takes to implement invoicing in a large multinational? And then we can go with Kamil and Hannu.
Yeah, so let me start with my comment on this. So you know, the longer period we have for the implementation, it's better for the taxpayer, but the optimal time we would expect to have it's 9 months, yeah, so 9 until 12 months. So this is the time which I also have heard from our IT, that this is the time they are expecting to prepare everything properly, check the system wise, make sure that we have in line with the regulation, with the requirements, with the local procedure, etc. Yeah, so this is the timeline which I'm aware of.
Thank you, Joanna. Kamil?
Well, my favorite definition of luck is when, you know, preparation meets the opportunity, and it is very true for invoicing as well. If an organization already has everything in order, they have, you know, proper ERP system well implemented, then the task is not so much difficult, because we as an ASP we act as a bridge. So we basically connect to the existing systems, and we're just responsible for relaying these invoices between companies. The problem is when the big entity is not ready. Sometimes they use different systems in different departments. Everything is scattered, and then implementation can take anything, from a couple of months to a year. And this is also why UAE government announced it way before the time, to give time for every company to go through their own housekeeping work and make sure that they are ready for the next year.
But how long?
I would definitely say that it can be anything from 3 months to a year, or even over a year for some cases.
Thank you. Hannu?
Well, that's a hard question. I quite agree with Kamil that it really depends on the multinational. Do they have invoicing in place in some country already? Can they copy something over from there? But if they are starting from scratch, then I think Joanna and Kamil are better to say how long that will take. But from a sort of government perspective, it's also important for us to consider when we make these legislations and requirements for companies that they do have an effect. And many companies do work in many countries. So, for example, if Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, if we all implement e-invoicing in a different way, then it will be a challenge for big companies. So we should try to find these common solutions, and thankfully Peppol can help with that. So if the multinational has Peppol invoicing in place in some country, I think it will be easier for them to also adopt it in the UAE.
Yes. So what we have seen is implementing invoicing system can be anything from, as Kamil mentioned, from 3 to 12 months, 6 months, 8 months. However, when it comes to getting ready to have the data ready, this is where there are a lot of challenges and issues start. Because we have seen that the data, the formats, or sometimes the data fields are available in their ERP system but are empty. And this configuration and change of the data formats to the right formats in the invoicing legislation or the PINT is not going to be an easy job, especially when a multinational have a different systems or and operates in a different jurisdiction. So it's very challenging to have the data right from the beginning, because if it's not right, so the problem is when invoicing will start evolving in the future, they will have problems with the data and with compliance as well, because the data from electronic invoicing will be used for compliance. So the implementation is quite long, I would say, from pre-implementation until going live. But after that, as well, we need to have in mind there will be a lot of maintenance because the legislation will change over time.
Diana, let me handle these few questions related to ISP. So I'll try to do it all at once.
Sure.
Plus the one about the freelancer and the license. The general rule is that if you're VAT registered, you have to comply with e-invoicing. Anyone who has VAT registered, they need to issue e-invoice for B2B and B2G transactions. Second question, how Dhruva can help a company with e-invoice implementation? Do you have technology partner who act as an ASP whom to contact? So we actually formed a new entity partnership with Dhruva. It's called ISAL. We figured that it's best to join forces. The market is big and there's a lot of companies that need help with the e-invoicing. So we're the technology partner, and we're also an ASP, accredited service provider, while Dhruva, they are consultants who help companies to understand, comply, improve their internal processes and a lot of things. So feel free to reach out to anyone from here. Diana, I think she will be the best point of contact. There is another question. Will the ASP appointed by a company be responsible for issued sales invoice and received suppliers invoices? Just to be clear, an ASP it's a bridge between you and the government. And the ASP responsibility is to make sure that we get the data and we send the data to all the right endpoints, entities, ministry, plus the buyer or the seller, whatever the scope is. And we're responsible for adapting the data to the format, validating the data, making sure that the invoice that you issued is compliant with the regulations. But we're not responsible for issuing the invoice itself. So you are responsible for issuing your invoices, maintaining the records, and ultimately making sure that that everything is in place. And there is one more. How do we determine the right ISP to appoint? Will our selection depend on the ERP system we use and its compatibility with ASP's platform, or should any ASP be able to serve any company regardless of its ERP system or IT infrastructure? So on the ministry website, you will see the list of accredited service providers. To be honest, I'm not able to tell you how other companies work. We have connectors to most of the platforms, most of the ERP systems on the market. And for those that we don't have connectors yet, we're in the process of building them. It does happen that we have companies that don't have any connectivity at all. We build the integration based on export, import. Sometimes we do some extra coding here and there. We have a team of developers. So, for example, in our case, we're capable of provide the solution for almost any company on the market. And that may or may not be true for every ASP. So some ASPs, they have systems where they have predefined connectors and they are focusing on these ERP systems. They are not going to serve others. Some of them are more flexible, like we are, and we try to cater to majority of the companies on the market, including the ones that don't have ERP system. So as I mentioned before, we are aware that there is a big market for companies that actually don't use any ERP system. We developed solution for them. We give it to them as a package. Thanks to that, they are able to have a mini CRM. They are able to track their invoices, sales, issue invoices, have business registry. And in the next version, we will be also adding AI business analytics to help you to analyze the trends, popularity of your products, and manage your company in a better way.
So thank you very much. There's some more questions. If we are going to share the presentation, yes, we will share the presentation after this, the webinar. And I will say thank you so much, Kamil, Hannu, and Joanna, for joining us during this webinar. Your insights and your experience is very helpful for all our audience in the UAE. And just you can feel free to share your 2 cents after we close this webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much.